and talk some big apes. Yes, we are here to talk some big apes. We continue our Konga line. We're dancing it through our PC for pre-code special, which we have tonight. Yes, folks, where we're looking all year, once a month at least, we look at films that were pre-code films. And tonight, we've got one that's a classic that you've heard of. You may have, just a few of you out there. And it's called King Kong 1933. Oh, yeah. Very excited, as you can tell, to talk about this one. So thank you for venturing down the stairs, pulling up the chair, and popping your favorite drink with us. I've got my long drink, or should I call it tonight, Kong drink. Oh. And tonight I have some wonderful crew members to talk about this 1933 monster film. First off, he's back with us, the last drive-in man, the literary license podcast man himself, Mr. Joe Randazzo is with us. Hello, Joe.
Hey, everyone.
Glad to have you with us. And kicking the seat, man, my right-hand man who keeps coming back for more, none other than Mr. Ian Simmons. Hello, Ian. How you doing?
I'm very tired. I've been already talking for an hour and a half, but I'm ready to go about this crazy big ape.
And I appreciate you coming on after doing your podcast, which everyone should check out over at Kicking the Seat as well. But go ahead.
Can I just mention something? It's an eerie coincidence, because the live stream I did on my channel right before coming on here was about a double feature of House of the Wax Museum from 1933 and the House of Wax from 53.
Wow.
And now we're talking about King Kong from 1933, both starring Fay Ray. What are the odds?
It's fate or fate.
And depending on how the wheel spin goes, we might have another Lionel Atwill film soon. I know Murders in the Zoo is on the wheel.
The Murders in the Zoo is on the wheel. It is indeed. So
I predict that's going to be the one that we talk about because of fate. Look, Joe, I think I need to rewatch History of the Wax Museum. We don't have to relitigate that here, but I did not like that movie. And when I saw House of Wax the next day, I was like, this is what I wanted in the Mystery of the Wax Museum. I wanted to see
a lot in that time period between the two.
It did, because Mystery of the Wax Museum is two different movies. They're two great tastes that don't necessarily taste great together. Anyway, let's talk about the giant ape.
Let's talk about the giant ape. Hey, Joe, you are wonderful at these things. Give us the synopsis, if you could, of the ape. I knew it. See,
you go off my tin of King Kong.
Your tin.
I still have the old tin. I have the Blu-ray too, but the old tin is just so nice because of all the cool shit in there. All right.
Got like the book, the book thing they put out.
I've got.
That's what my inside is.
Yeah, I've got those.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's his inside. Yeah.
Except mine has a bunch of cool stuff like lobby card reprints and
nice
that kind of thing. And it's apparently I could have gotten a 27 by 40 poster that I never sent away for. Damn it! I should have done it.
Don't you hate when that happens?
Happens all the time.
Yeah, you find out about something and it's too late to act on it. Seeking a backer for his movie, Marion C. Cooper approached a Hollywood mogul. You know what a 50-foot gorilla would see in a 5-foot girl? The mogul asked. His breakfast, the studio chief. Wait, this isn't a synopsis of the movie, though.
That isn't a synopsis of the movie.
No, it's not. Okay, well, Carl Denham and his crew, many of whom really don't want Ann Darrow around and really don't seem to like women. The one guy in particular is very vocal about this. They set sail for Skull Island, where they're going to shoot his latest action adventure movie, and the crew is kind of what's the word I'm looking for here? The crew is kind of apprehensive because they don't know exactly what they're going to find there, and as Carl Denham points out, well, I can't tell the future. He knows he wants to shoot there. He knows he's making all these great adventure epics. And apparently he's never had a woman in any of them, because that's a line of dialogue in the beginning. He did a bunch of movies and never had a woman in any of them. So they get there and they they're shooting some stuff with Ann Darrow, who's played by Fay Wray, and at one point they tell her, you know, she's seeing something and to scream, and she lets out this amazing blood curdling scream, which is why she's referred to as the first Scream Queen. They get to the island where they witness a sacrifice being made to Kong, but they interrupt it. The natives kind of chase them away, but they want Ann Darrow, who they call the Golden Woman, and they're willing to trade 6 of their native women for her. And Carl Denham and his crew are basically like, no, and you know, let's start walking Ann back to the ship. That night, the natives sneak onto the ship and kidnap Ann, and they set her up as like this ultimate sacrifice to Kong. And then give themselves away by having the big, you know, the big ceremony in the middle of the night to where everyone looks out the window and goes, "Hey, what's going on over there?" It's like they're doing another sacrifice. Hey, has anybody seen the cute blonde we brought on board? No. We should probably go. So yeah, they go out there to try to rescue Ann Darrow, and man, it's amazing because it's like 46 minutes before we even see Kong.
Mm-hmm.
That's what's really like amazing. It keeps you in suspense, and you know, I'm sure everybody here has already seen it, so we already know. If not, we've seen clips, so we know what King Kong looks like. But I'm just trying to imagine 1933 audiences looking up at that, just like, what the hell? I mean, the effects, yeah, they look quaint today, but for 33, this is really good. We've seen some stuff in the last couple of movies, you know, where we'd see like the method of storytelling, and we see how this one, and I want to say this one, Public Enemy, Frankenstein, and Scarface are probably the movies that like kind of push us forward from this era more than any, at least from what I've seen and from what I can recall, like right now. But yeah, the rest of the story, you know, cool dinosaur fights, you know, that brutal where he rips the T-Rex's mouth open. The Foley design for that really helps out because it makes it sound so visceral.
Crunchy. Yeah, so crunchy.
Yeah, crunchy. And you know, they rescue Fay Wray, they take King Kong back to New York, and then you have the whole mess in Midtown Manhattan where he gets loose and rampages all over. Classic story. I probably could have reiterated all that without having watched it today. That's how like legendary the story is at this point. The one thing that nobody ever brings up though, and I feel bad for that poor woman who's just sleeping in her comes in, grabs her, pulls her out. It's like, oh, that's not Fay Wray. Just chucks her down to the ground.
And we never see what happened to her. I mean, like, it's not like we saw like firemen with one of those giant bouncy net things below her. She's toast.
She's falling into a crowd.
Yeah.
There's that wonderful camera shot that you watch her falling, basically.
It cuts right. She kind of falls and then gradually disappears into like this inky kind of murk. But yeah, we don't see what happens to her. It's awful. But yeah, it's. But I love that moment, not because I want to see, you know, people ripped out of their bedrooms and dropped by a giant ape, but just that it shows the carelessness of this giant creature who doesn't quite know what to do with people around.
Yeah.
I mean,
you're not the one I wanted. Well, goodbye.
Right.
What's interesting on the rewatch, I mean, I love this film. I love it not just because I'm a kaiju monster fan. I love it because I always try to put myself, like you said, Joe, in the seats of 1933, going to this theater. I mean, sound, as we mentioned before, sound is fairly new yet in cinema, relatively. I mean, people aren't really used yet to seeing a whole lot of talkies, much less a monster movie, like a big monster movie. You get that first shot of Kong showing up and Fay Wray looks about this big and you're like, holy balls. And then rewatching this, I'm like, holy crap, I just forget every time just how violent this movie.
No, this is really, really violent for its time. That's what's amazing about this. The scene where the crew members are hanging onto the log and Kong is just knocking him down into that pit, and you just see like a guy just come down and flat on the ground, like, oh, okay.
Well, the one guy bounces. You watch the bodies and they bounce, and you're just like, shit, I know they're little clay guys now, but like 1933, people had to be like, what the hell?
Well, yeah, I mean, even Kong, when he falls off the Empire State Building, sorry, spoiler, he doesn't just fall down, he takes like a couple of headers like down. But that's the other thing that is just amazing. When Kong fights the T-Rex, I mean, people still don't really know how dinosaurs moved. I mean, much of what we have is speculation based on, bones and science. But watching Kong fight the T-Rex, I was just amazed by how they move. They were like wrestling with each other, and the T-Rex was doing things with its neck and head, like kind of weaving and almost like nuzzling in some cases, while also snapping its jaws. I mean, to animate it was one thing, but to come up with the idea of the choreography of how it was going to be animated is quite another thing. My youngest, and I think I talked about this last week, talking about the original Godzilla. My youngest woke up this morning and sat down, and he's like, "What are you watching?" I was like, "Oh, it's King Kong. You want to watch one?" I was like, "I don't want to watch the black and white movie," because I showed him a bit of Godzilla last week, and he was like, "Eh." But I showed him the T-Rex Kong fight, and he was just completely enraptured. I mean, he's 6.5, but he wasn't like, "Oh, this doesn't look realistic. It's not like the stuff that I watch in movies nowadays." He couldn't tell the difference, and he was just blown away, especially with the kill shot of like prying its jaws open and the snapping. It's so good.
That is just brutal to watch. And then he's just lifting it up just to like make sure it's dead. He's like flapping it.
Yeah. And then we see it later when the people come across it, and you can see like there's little rivers of blood like pouring out of its head. It's like so gnarly.
Yeah, and that's the thing is you watch this, and I just forgot how seriously brutal this whole movie is. I mean, even when you get to the Stegosaurus the very first time, because I'm just picturing, okay, you just showed King Kong pick up Fay Ray, which has got to be mind-blowing, and you intercut your stop motion, your wonderful stop motion for the time, and even today there's a lot of movement with this stop motion characters. Cut it in with the big puppet head, which I did see when I went on the Universal Studios tour 28 years ago, but I got to see that. Yeah, even though the Kong ride was busted, I was able to at least see part of that. Just the way they blend this. I know we take this stuff for granted now, but you look at what they do here. So then you get the scene where the guys are crawling up, and you're like, oh, okay, that's the gimmick, King Kong. Okay, they got King Kong with her great. Then they're encountering a Stegosaurus, which charges at them. I mean, some of these scenes, I know how campy they are, but they've got a little bit of tension in them. When that Stegosaurus doesn't die and they keep shooting it and it just keeps getting up, you're just like, I'm actually kind of tense right now.
And that's the thing. Great storytelling is timeless.
Mm-hmm. Right. And this is a word that we've kind of talked about on the show before. You use the word campy. It's not campy. Right. It is an older filmmaking technique, and it's what they had at their disposal back then. But I was watching King Kong this morning. This is the first time I've ever watched King Kong, the original. Yeah.
Wow.
Now, I kind of shot myself in the foot because I'd seen the Peter Jackson version, which we're going to talk about. I watched the 76 one with Jeff Bridges a few years ago. So in watching this, I mean, those remakes kind of hit the same beats. So I was unfortunately bored by a lot of King Kongs, and like, oh, here's the part where they're trudging through the forest. But I was amazed by the animation and what they're doing with it. And I think it's the artistry and the inventiveness that they had to employ in order to pull off this illusion This is one of the reasons that I still, I mean, I know you love the Legendary movies, Mark, but I'm just so bored by them because there's a lot of talent that goes into rendering these characters and stuff, but I don't see the invention or the necessity for invention the way that I do when I'm watching something that's, almost 100 years old.
Yeah, and I get that for sure. And watching this, I've alluded to it before, and we've talked about it before, so apologize for repetition, but it still needs to be said. You watch this film and you go, you're still using some of the same filmmaking techniques that they invented literally when they were shooting Kong, aka the rear projection that you have in here, the extensive live action front sets with the rear projection and interacting. You get that now with stagecraft, is basically the same thing. You have some real world elements in the foreground, and in the background it's digital, but it's still rear projection basically. So here, like what I mentioned, the Stegosaurus charge, I forgot how much real plant life set they have built around the guys, and the screen is further back because when they finally take out the Stegosaurus, they walk into it towards the Stegosaurus. And even though I know how it is, it actually doesn't look that bad for them walking toward. You're like, oh, it's only when they're kind of doing the sidestepping. But even then, I'm like, that had to be wild for these actors to see this, because they had to do all the stop motion stuff before they shot this stuff on stage. It's not like they were looking at a green screen. They're looking at the video, the film playing back of these monsters. And that had to be just wild for them to try, but also help them acting at the same time. But, that Stegosaurus scene. And then, you just keep, some modern filmmakers really need to take a hint from this film. I don't know what you guys feel, but they really made Skull Island, like Skull Mountain, like a threatening place. It's like there's danger constantly.
Yeah, I mean, and a lot of that, like when he's fighting like there's the pterodactyl that shows up. There was another one where Kong has Anne on a cliff, and then our hero guy, I can't remember his name.
Driscoll. Jack.
I should have known his name was Jack. That's the stock name for a lot of these movie heroes. But he kind of sneaks over it and rescues her, and they kind of rappel down this rope down the side of this mountain. And you can see in the background like the rest of the island. And I was getting like kind of dizzy and freaked out. And then Kong realizes that his girlfriend is gone, and he grabs the rope and starts pulling them back up. I'm like, what is happening right now? It's really thrilling. There's also the bit where Anne is in that tree while the T-Rex fight is going on, and the tree bit topples over. So you see like her like kind of falling. I got like a weird vertigo as it was toppling over, even though I knew what I was watching was an illusion. I was completely bought into it. And then when she is on the ground, there's like the bit of the tree is covering her leg and everything, and it's very much a set, but you buy it. It's editing, it's acting, it's, to your word, Mark, stagecraft. It all works together completely perfectly in ways that I don't know. I was keyed into that in ways that when I go see something that's just like a giant CGI nightmare, all this stuff breezes right past me and has no impact.
And I just saw Godzilla X Kong over the weekend, and I'm sitting in a theater with it. It's gigantic screen in front of me, and it didn't affect me the way this one does. So yeah, I totally get that too, because I'm like, there's so much more craftsmanship put into this, and they go out of their way to make sure it looks as real as they can get it to look for 1933. Which there was a sequel, which I don't know if either of you guys saw it, that came out later the same year, Son of Kong. Which,
it's been ages.
Yeah, it's been a while for me too, but I remember I saw it, and it's not nearly as good, but it's still interesting because it looks like they might have just taken some stuff that they cut out of the original film and maybe just shot new stuff around it. Because that's supposed to be Kong's son. But you guys know about the spider scene that got cut out because apparently it freaked out audiences?
I've heard about it, but I've never watched it. I assume it's on the
no, it's lost.
Right?
No, it's lost.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
doesn't
Oh,
exist
is it?
anymore.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's why it's never been cut back into any version of it. Peter Jackson did his best to refilm it based on what people said happened in it and based on the screenplay. So he tried to recreate it, but we'll talk about that next week when we do Peter Jackson's King Kong. But yeah, apparently freaked people out so heavily in 1933 that they went and cut it out. They were like, yeah, people are. From what I understand, there were two reactions. There were people who either screamed and left, or there were people who wouldn't stop talking about how great the sequence was throughout the rest of the movie. And I don't know which is worse.
Because I had heard about the spider scene. I guess I just assumed that it existed, and I knew that Peter Jackson had kind of put it back together for his version of it. That's fascinating. I guess I should go back and I don't know. Did anyone do the crew math? Because like they say that 12 people died during the exposition, but is there any bit where like, oh, you've got 8 people in this one scene and 5 people in the next scene, but 3 of them died in the spider scene that no one ever saw?
The most I can figure out with the crew math is the guy at the very beginning who's approaching the ship says that there's 3 times as many people on this ship as what's needed to run it. So yeah, I don't know exactly how many.
Did they all get eaten by the spiders? Jesus.
I mean, we saw a lot of them die pretty grisly deaths for this movie.
Oh. I mean, we've just mentioned the log scene.
Well, they're at the bottom of the log when they fall into the pit.
Yeah,
that's like the spiders get them. Like,
okay.
Oh, is that what happens?
Yeah.
Wow.
Wait, but what? So they weren't dead?
I guess they weren't dead.
Weren't completely dead.
But some of them weren't. Maybe. I mean, like, I don't know. I've never seen the scene. I can't say some stills. I think some stills exist, but beyond that, not much.
Wow.
Well, you know, I forgot too how much of this film takes place on the island. Relatively, you know, there's actually a short amount of time in New York, in all honesty.
Yeah, it's only like the last 20 minutes are in New York.
Yeah, you know, and it's like, holy crap, a whole you know, half of this film is on this island, which is wonderful. Because
it's 45 minutes where Kong isn't even there yet.
Yeah.
So yeah,
they really go all out once they reveal Kong. And then, like I said, there's monsters everywhere. When they finally do rescue, you know, Anne and get back to the village people who were scared of the crew who were shooting guns suddenly all come out and help protect the door because Kong's pissed and he's going to break through it. Never mind the fact that there's at least 2 shots, maybe 3, where Kong eats someone.
Yeah.
And I'm not talking about a far away. They use the big animatronic they created for this thing, and you see a guy in his teeth.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting because he didn't like. There's quite a few people eat scenes in here, and he doesn't rip them in half, and he doesn't swallow them whole. He takes a couple of bites and then throws them away. It's like, oh my gosh.
You think, oh, that was a bad idea.
Yeah, human insides don't taste as good as I thought they would.
Well, you do mention brutal. Like I said, watching it again, because it's been a while since I watched it, and I have watched it a few times, but I always forget how brutal, because the first time he picks up one of the native folks of the island, and he's chewing on him, and the guy's screaming while he's in the teeth. It's not like it's a quick kill. This guy's like, and then you just watch him slowly die, and I'm just like, oh man.
You hear the crunching in some parts too.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. One of the things that, because watching Godzilla 54 for the first time last week too, a lot of first times for me recently. The idea of the press being sort of the problem or one of the catalysts for mayhem, because in Godzilla you've got them on that tower, like there are flash bulbs going off, and it attracts Godzilla. In this one, you know, when they get Kong to New York and he's all kind of like chained up, and Anne and Jack are down kind of at his feet, the press crew come in with all their like flash bulbs, and it just like drives them crazy. And you get the close-ups of the bulbs, and Kong just like, I can't take it. He's like having a seizure, and then he goes on a rampage. It's really kind of cool. I like those little parallels. You don't really think about.
Denim yelling that he thinks they're hurting the girl. He thinks they're hurting the girl. And that's what's pissing him off. And they're just like, whatever, man. We're getting our shots.
Yeah, because they believe, what was it? Not titanium. It was like platinum steel or something like that.
Steel,
yeah.
This 100-foot thing can't possibly break out of it. Somehow.
No. Which, it's hilarious that you mentioned that, because I was noticing, because I watched the 54 Godzilla for your show last week, Ethan, and it is interesting the parallels when you get to the monster action that you have between Godzilla and Kong in a number. There's a number of parallels, including a train getting derailed, which I don't know why I forgot Kong did that, but he gets there, and at one point he just gets pissed at this train. He's like, well, fuck this, and he starts smashing this train, and the train comes and falls over. I'm like,
I think it's because the Godzilla, he actually like chews on the train. And I think that's why the Godzilla one is so much more memorable.
Well, the on the Kong one, because he's like starts after the train is derailed, he starts smashing on it. You can see people like falling out of the bottom and the lower left of the frame. It's eerie. I mean, you like modern sensibilities would have it like there'd be more carnage and people like kind of trapped inside, like getting crushed. But you don't need that. The less is more principle definitely plays out here. It's super effective, and I didn't necessarily think it would be, but yeah,
it's amazing that like 2 years later this movie would not be able to be made because the Hays Code would stop a lot of this stuff dead in its tracks.
Like what? Let's talk about what some of those restrictions, how the Hays Code restrictions would apply to King Kong. Do we have the list?
I don't have to get the list. It's in the other room.
If you want to get,
I think we definitely would not see a giant ape chewing on people. That's definitely something we would not see. Nothing that horrific.
And let's not forget the infamous scene that was eventually cut because it was considered too salacious. I watched the 104-minute version. There's actually a 101-minute version of this film that's on Max. I don't know if there's quite a difference between them. I didn't watch the Max version. I watched the 104-minute version. But we get the scene that was eventually cut because it was considered too scandalous. Kong stripping Miss Ann Darrow once he finally kills the plesiosaur, and he's out on the cliff, and Driscoll's trying to get to him, and he's pulling her the top layer of her dress off.
Yeah,
it looks like he's tickling her, kind of, right?
Yeah,
right.
And you see a little bit of her butt cheeks underneath, and I'm like, oh, that's probably pissed. That probably pissed off the censors back then.
Well, and then her negligee is showing when he pulls off the dress as well. The off the shoulder. Well, yeah, tame today, but back then, I mean, her dress is ripped, so you've got the implication of what's underneath, and you get to see her undergarment underneath, and you've got Kong kind of, creepy smiling at her and tickling her a bit. And if you look at that whole scene, I'm like, I'm feeling a little uncomfortable right now.
Yeah, that stuff would definitely not. I mean, they probably cut it for the re-release.
The code, yeah.
As far as what would be in the 101-minute version versus the 104-minute version, they probably just cut the overture on Max.
Yeah,
that's probably
that could be. Yeah.
There's like a 2-3 minute overture at the beginning of it.
Yeah, most likely. Yeah, you're right.
Well, the other thing that I was surprised, and I think this is just the glory of high definition. I mean, negligees aside, the censors completely missed the scene where Anne and Jack are talking to each other on the boat, and she's wearing this kind of like a white top. It was very cold on that ship. That's all I'll say. Did you guys catch that? I'm like, holy crap!
Yeah.
And the other thing is the blood coming out of the T-Rex's mouth would definitely not be something that we would have been able to see a couple years later. Yeah. If you watch 1 Million BC in 1940, the Victor Mature movie, there's a lot of times where Victor Mature is stabbing dinosaurs and you're not seeing any blood. It's just It's still there. The dinosaur's just still there coming at him. That would be gone.
That'd be gone too. Yeah, I haven't seen the 50 because this was re-released in 52, which makes me I would be interested to see that cut to see what probably kind of got. Is that on that collection? I don't know. I haven't seen. There is a documentary on here as well as the Ray Harryhausen, which Ray Harryhausen. Okay, folks. Yes, I know it's 1933. I know these are stop motion creatures. The sheer amount of movement for your stop motion creatures in this is insane, and not just Kong. And I mean, you've seen like the island the land of time forgotten, all those stop motions, sure, but Kong is highly animated throughout this whole film, and all the creatures. There's a lot of moving stuff going on to give you the impression Kong's pissed, or he's fighting a creature who is alive. I mean, man, even by today's standard, you look at the stop motion in that, and it's mind blowing what he did 100 years ago.
Yeah,
it's crazy watching. Go ahead.
Yeah, there's a reason this movie is so beloved by people who grew up in that era, because like my dad was born in 1929 and he loved King Kong. Because he probably saw this, in Italy in the early 30s, and it probably blew his, 4 or 5 year old mind,
Yeah, I mean, well, okay, so this is the anniversary of this was last year, whatever that would have been.
Over 90.
90 years old, yeah. So it's 91, yeah.
Okay, so 10 years from now, I'm sure we'll see some big, art house theater revivals of seeing this on the big screen. Because I would love to see it on like a gigantic, not an IMAX, not something cheesy like that, but like a movie palace, kind of a big screen, because that's where it kind of belongs. Yeah, it does have that special kind of like, let's go out to the movies and see a show.
I mean, when you consider what else you're getting around this time, you're getting a lot of drawing room melodramas, You're
getting the gangster films that we saw that are like,
the gangster films are, some of them are better than others, because you have some that are, kind of like what the hell, but then you get your Public Enemies, your Scarface, your Little Caesars, stuff like that. But
I think it's scope, though.
Yeah,
looking at scope for this film is crazy.
It really is, because there's literally nothing else like it at this point in time. Like you can't imagine it. Like Frankenstein 2 years prior. People talk about, well, you went to see that, you couldn't believe what you were seeing. But yeah, King Kong, certainly not.
Well, I watched, it was like a month ago, the 1924 silent film Dante's Inferno. And I was reminded a lot about that watching King Kong, because that had a lot of, projected kind of like painted hell landscapes, and a lot of that you kind of see that in Skull Island here. And what I think the advancement, if I just might project or speculate here, is in the layering. There's so much depth when you're looking at any given scene or environment in Skull Island. You've got your foreground, your middle ground, your middle ground, your background. I swear there's like a background beyond the background. It's almost like a 3D effect, but it blends so well that you might think to yourself, well, this has to be a painting or layered sets or something, because they didn't shoot on this island. But damn it, you believe it when it's happening. And you also believe it when you see Kong step out to fight the T-Rex. Like, I keep going back to that, because just the setup of that fight, the way they kind of like square up on each other and size each other up before they grapple. I mean, it's the kind of thing that I certainly didn't think of as being not capable, but a thing back in the 1930s. It feels very modern in the way that it's like you imagine Megatron, Optimus Prime fighting in this style in a Transformers movie, but Michael Bay was ripping off something that if he did watch this movie, it was like 50 years before he was making movies.
It's almost certain he had seen this movie.
Yeah.
Kevin Smith tells a funny story, because when he was tasked to write that Superman film, was it John Peters was the producer.
Yeah.
Said, I want the doors to swing open, and Superman's fighting a giant spider.
And we got that in the Flash last year.
And we got
finally.
that in the Flash last year.
Kevin Smith ends the story by going, we couldn't make it happen on that film. The film never got made, but sure enough, I go see Wild Wild West, and there's Will Smith fighting a giant animal. Fucking great.
So yeah, I mean,
one of the most influential films ever.
And then we've got our human characters who are all your stereotypical type of guys, but some of the dialogue in this, like Ann Darrow. So she's a woman who our filmmaker guy finds on the street. She's kind of a street urchin type of. She's trying to steal an apple. He's like, hey, you're gorgeous. Be in my movie, And I love the scene. It's even modern nowadays, though, the way it's handled in a good and bad way. He goes, hey, the reason I'm giving you food that isn't because, I'm just trying to be helpful. I want you to be in my movie. And she gives him the side-eye look like,
yeah.
What?
No, I'm on the level.
Yeah, she gives him that kind of what movie, and he's like, well, no, not like
another
that.
pre-code thing, because there's the inference that there's sex without marriage,
right?
In this world, where after the Hays Code, you can't even reference any kind of sex, let alone sex without marriage.
I mean, it's written very subtly, but if you know the situation, you can pick up on the nuance of what they're going for. You're like, oh yeah, she knew exactly what he was trying. She's like, well, he's like, no. And then she's on the boat, and of course, none of the sailor guys want her on the boat, including our captain, who suddenly falls in love with her just out of the blue, But before that, he hits her accidentally. She comes up behind him, and he hits her, putting up his hands. And then they have this kind of awkward dialogue where she's talking about she's very excited, and he's like, yeah, I don't like women on my ship. And was it she asks something about you don't like women on your ship, and he goes, oh, I guess I didn't apologize for that pretty good rap in the chin before. Like, totally changes the subject. Like, just like,
dude, when the Simpsons did their King Kong parody, it's Smithers and Burns talking on the boat because he was pissed that he got Marge on the boat. He's like, and Smithers tells him, yeah, I just feel like women and semen don't mix. And I'm like, oh. Watching this tonight, I was like, "Oh yeah,
there it is."
The Smithers line about.
Well, and then you get the other scene later. You realize it's hilarious because you paid attention. You're like, she's talking to our one Asian cast member. Charlie is his name of all things, and asks him if he gets tired after 6 weeks of peeling potatoes. So they've been on this boat for 6 weeks before they get to Kong Island already. So they've been hanging, and then our captain Courageous comes up. I'll just call him that. Driscoll comes up, and she again brings up the idea that, he doesn't like women, and he goes, women can't help but be a bother. That's just the way they're made.
Yep.
Oh my God. Our hero. But then like half an hour later, he's like, I love you, and he's like, oh, wait, you probably don't feel the same way. I'm like, dude, you've been like hounding her for like the whole trip going, you should be here.
But he's cute.
But he is.
So she naturally reciprocates. And I love that the captain like calls down to him, like, you're wanted up here. And he just like kind of looks off screen like, yeah, I'll be right there. I'm like, wait, where are these people in relation to each other? Is the rest of the crew like watching him make out with Ann Darrow?
Yeah. Well, they've got a huge crew, so we know that, there's got to be some eyes on
3
them.
times the amount of people that it takes to run that ship, according to the dialogue.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
and then we get our natives on here, and while it's funny because watching this, I'm like watching, I'm like, okay, while the portrayal of the natives may not be exactly the best, they actually cast we don't have people in blackface
There is that.
in the cast. They actually cast, parts that aren't people in like blackface or like you would get later in like a Mothra or Godzilla colored film where they've spray painted people,
Oh fuck.
Yeah.
That's right. Forgot about those.
You have actual, so that surprised me. But again, that's another thing where we're talking early 30s, the filmmaking of that. I was impressed at least that they had cast appropriately as far as for them being not white folks made to look like natives.
I think by this point, though, like in the 1920s, Al Jolson, but I think by this point, I don't think there was that much using white people in blackface. If I could,
right.
By 1933, I think they were just casting black people for the most part.
Mm-hmm.
And we had a lot of yellow face though, because we did Charlie Chan and Chu and all that stuff being played by white actors. But I think usually when we'd see blackface, like 10 years later, Holiday Inn, you have that infamous dance number, but that's white people playing white people who are in blackface. So it's a weird area.
Right, but I was just impressed that there was some diversity in the casting, even though the role might not have been the best. The fact that they actually
let's
talk about that. Like, what's wrong with the portrayals of the natives in the movie?
Actually,
given the context of when this was made,
very true.
It's not like we had the internet or a lot of diversity of people like from Africa that we just like go and interview and say, hey, tell me about your native tribes. No, a lot of it was probably National Geographic magazines and stuff, and they were portrayed as a civilized culture that had rituals. They've got feathers and spears and all that stuff, but I think a lot of that is the reason modern people might call offense to it is because of the stereotypes have been dreamt up in the last 70 years. There are ways to handle that stuff sensitively, and I think to the extent that the people making this movie were trying to portray a lost native tribe on this mysterious island, they did a pretty bang up job.
Actually, better than films after it.
If you watch some of the Sam Newfield movies, like White Pongo and stuff like that, those are definitely. But I think it's more they didn't know better, you know. Which, what are you going to, the movie's nearly 100 years old. What are you going to say about it now? You gotta take the film as it is now. You can't really complain. You could put a little warning on the front, like Warner tends to do nowadays. I didn't watch this on Max. I don't know. For all I know, it might be there on Max, being like, hey, there's some insensitive.
But that's what I'm saying is like, what actually is insensitive about it?
You're right.
It's sensitive now in hindsight because we have the knowledge that they didn't have 100 years ago.
But what I'm getting at is, what is that knowledge? Like, in the context of the story, they're going to a part of the world that no one has ever explored before, and they come upon a culture that no one has encountered before. And that culture happens to be, people living in the jungle. They've got their own rituals. They have their own dress. Like, who's to say that we wouldn't encounter those kinds of people today who haven't been molested by modernity and they don't have like smartphones and things like that. I feel like there's a modern sensibility that looks for things that they don't understand. They just kind of blanket call it racism without thinking, well, how does it relate to the story that's trying to be told? And I think it does it well.
I feel like for something to be racist, there would have to be a malicious intention.
Yes.
Yeah, no, this isn't that by any means. I wasn't trying to imply that at all. And you're right, though. Overall, if you wanted to criticize anything about portrayals of folks who weren't white, I would say the guy peeling the potatoes on the boat was probably portrayed maybe. I mean, if someone wanted to really look, but you're right. No, Ian, you're absolutely right. Actually,
Yeah,
but even that guy, what was racist
You have to
about
be
that?
looking
He was
for
an
it.
Asian guy who had an accent, who was on a boat full of like
white guys,
people
yeah,
around the
yeah.
world. I mean, you look at you could look at what was that? My God, I can't think of it. The Nosferatu movie that came out last year. Last Voyage of the Demeter.
Oh yeah,
Right?
Last Voyage of the Demeter. Yeah.
Right. What did you have on there? And it's something that people kind of praised that movie about is a diverse cast of people
Sure.
who are, they sail around the world on this barge doing like these odd jobs. And it's a multi-ethnic group of people. And some of them happen to be Asian and they had an accent. But we look back 70 years like, oh my God, I can't believe they had this Asian guy on a boat and he had an accent. And like, what the fuck do you people want?
No, it's a valid point. No, I was just bringing up that if someone wanted to find, they could possibly, but you're right. Even in context, I mean, our natives aren't portrayed like really primitive natives. I mean, the guy comes up and rather than just attacking the white guys right away, basically, he comes up and he's like, the chief's like, oh, I'm gonna face these guys off, and he looks, he's like, oh, hey, wait, tell you what, I got 6. I'll take 6 for your 1, and we'll call it a day because we got a sacrifice ritual. You broke up my ritual already, and it was all handled. They weren't handled like they were handled like not fully developed, but I mean they were a civilized, like you said, they were an organization. They had their rituals and everything, but they weren't handled like they were dumb primitives. Let's put it that way. They weren't handled like they were like we've seen some to where it's just like
Right. It's not like they were all dancing around just like, all acting like apes and like they were not human.
Yeah.
Yeah, which unfortunately would happen in movies a little later on. I mean, if there's one group demographically that's being denigrated throughout this entire movie, it's women.
Oh God, yeah.
Oh, women just get in the way.
They're just made that way. It's not their
just
fault.
Made that way. There's nothing they can do about it. They just get in the way. That's if anything, that's the one group that could be like, yo, wait a minute.
Well, yeah, and Fay Ray is pretty much your damsel in distress. I mean, she doesn't really make a huge amount of effort of escaping a little bit, but
I mean, but again, I feel like I'm going round and round with these stereotypes and portrayals in old movies. What the hell else do you expect from her character? She's a street urchin living in New York. She gets transplanted to Africa under the auspices of making a movie, and she finds out that she is essentially turned into bait for a 400-foot gorilla monster.
Yeah.
She's petrified. Most of the time, she's not doing anything to escape. It's because she's been placed 300 feet in the air on a piece of a tree.
Yeah, because
or at the top of the Empire, right? Or on the top of the Empire State Building. Like I got serious vertigo that climactic scene because he's got her up on that building. He places her on a ledge. And at the very end, you see, there's a ladder that she could feasibly. I didn't see that ladder in a lot of the medium shots. I'm like, I don't know where that came from, but just the idea of you're on this like little ledge, like 1,000 feet above your impending doom. It's so, oh my gosh. But yeah, I mean, she was. I think we get a lot more of her character at the beginning of the movie, sure.
Right.
So when she becomes the Scream Queen, it's not like I think her portrayal in Mystery of the Wax Museum, where I complained on my other show, like all she does in the end of that movie is scream her head off, and I'm like, she's no longer a person. She's just a pair of pipes. But I think in King Kong, there's a lot more to her than that.
Well, yeah, and again, I'm mostly playing devil's advocate here with this because what I was impressed with her character is like. She goes through this whole traumatic experience, and then we cut to New York, which I love because almost every other Kong film after this, we get some scene of them transporting Kong on a boat. Here, they knock him out with gas, and then you get, Carl Denham, and he goes, "Oh, we're gonna toss him on a boat, and we're gonna scare him," and then we cut to New York. It's like, oh. Okay, they must have successfully transported him with no incident whatsoever, and I loved that. And where I was going with this is Ann Darrow, for everything she goes through, she's at this showing, and it's like, oh, you need me to do this for the show in front of Kong, even though he's changed. Okay, it's not like she's suffering from some traumatic, the traumatic experience. Like, no, I can't do this. This is just going to bring back to. No, she's making time with her boyfriend, and then they show up, and she's like, oh, this is going to make people a lot of money, isn't it? And Denham's like, yeah. He's like, we made $10,000 at the door. Now, because we are the spoiler room and we cover old films, I have looked up the conversion rate for $10,000 at the box office for this showing of Kong. It equals today $238,000, 712 bucks. Yeah, 238,712 for $10,000 in 1933. What equals today $238,000 to see Kong at the box.
And that's for one night. Like if his scheme had worked and he turned this into a show, my gosh. It's funny because you've got the crowd of people going in and they're like, I don't know what this thing is going to be, but it better be something, because I spent $20 on these tickets.
Yeah.
Like,
well, also with the $1 that Denham gives the fruit vendor, I looked that up. That's $24 almost.
Mm-hmm.
That's a $24 apple she's chewing there.
That's why the guy had no problem. He was just like, oh, yeah, okay, fine.
$25 for this apple? Yeah, I'll take it. So, yeah. So, $20.
No, it's $24 to look the other way as he takes this girl off to the island.
Like if she's stealing apples, I
guess it's about $450 a ticket. Is my math right on that? Because if it's $24, if $1 is $24 today, and
I think so.
Do this, and I could just pull up my calculator and
I love that
times 200, because I spent $200 on these tickets. 24 times. Oh no, 4,800.
Oh wow!
So yeah, you're paying $5,000 for that ticket.
And I love that they're paying $5,000 for something they don't even know what it is, because you got the one older lady. She's like, "Oh, I love this guy's movies. I can't wait to see his next one." And the usher's like,
"Madam."
Yeah, she's like, "Oh," but just the fact that she would pay $5,000 to see a movie. Like, what?
Yeah, well, he made good movies apparently, just not romantical ones. Until
maybe it was $5,000 because this was supposed to be the first one with a woman in it.
This seems wrong. 24 times 200? No, 4,800.
Yeah. So yeah, it was a lot of money, and remember he was giving a percentage to the Darrow. So I mean there's some bank there that he was, and here's what's funny, and we're going to talk about it more next week when we look at Peter Jackson's, because watching this, I was starting to think of Peter Jackson's, and I'm not going to get into it now. We'll wrap up here with Kong 33, but I was just thinking of like, wow, he changed a number of things, and I'm like, I'm not sure if I like some of the changes he may have made with the dynamic, but we did talk about the 76 version on our podcast here, and I think many of the panel did not care for that one.
I didn't like it when I saw it most recently, so.
I liked it. I think that was because that was my only real experience with Kong beyond the Peter Jackson one, which watching it for next week will be the first time I've seen it in almost 20 years, because I did not like that movie.
I don't remember a lot of changes though, but I mean, I know this one's 3 hours long, but I don't know.
I mean, and again, we'll get into it next week. It's the dynamic mostly between Kong and Darrow, I think.
Oh, okay, yeah. Okay. Yeah, there's a lot more that happens in New York in the new one. Yeah.
Right. So we don't get that here. I mean, we get a lot of Kong like, I've got a girl.
I will say it's weird watching this now and seeing Fay Wray, particularly in this movie. She looked kind of like Naomi Watts, but she also looked more like a blend between Naomi Watts and Penelope Ann Miller. Like that was really good casting on Jackson's part. But yeah, we'll talk about that next week.
Oh, absolutely. Just a little bit of tidbit for those who like numbers. Since I did do a bit of conversion, I went further and did a little more conversion. And the opening weekend total estimate for this was $90,000 in 1933. So that's a little over $2 million
Whoa.
today in today's money. But still, I'm like, for a film like this that nobody probably knew what it was going to be about. What a big, you look at the trailer and it's like, holy crap, what is this thing about? Apparently overall, when it was first shown, it made $2 million. Again, 1933, and we're talking single screens here, folks.
These are the posters, though. Like,
yeah,
these look so cool.
those posters were awesome.
So yeah, this is going to get you in a theater.
So you're looking at it. It was 47 million for its first run that it made. Which that's not bad.
No, Joe, I love those are the lobby cards, right?
Yeah. Well, so I think these might be posters.
Those are mini posters, I think.
They're mini posters.
Okay. Because I like the accordion presentation of them,
Yeah.
like folding out like that. It's nice.
Yeah, just a little stream of mini posters that they put in here. The set is worth, like, obviously if you have the Blu-ray, I watched the Blu-ray, but I always hung on to this set because I love just all the extra stuff in there. It is so cool.
But yeah, so I mean, for a film of its time, there's a lot of impressive stuff, man. I would love to go back and be that 1933 person sitting down going, what the hell am I watching? And just be blown away by what you see, because you've never seen anything on that scope and scale before, like probably ever.
If you go to a movie theater in 1933, make sure you go on Saturday, because as I've learned from the Three Stooges, that's bath night.
Oh, well, there you go.
Apparently they don't bathe the rest of the week. Every time Curly ended up in the bathtub, what's that Saturday?
Fantastic. So before we get to find out what our pre-code film is for next month, let's get your final thoughts with King Kong. Ian, your final thoughts, since this was basically your first viewing of it.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, I wish this had been my first experience with King Kong, because I mentioned I'd seen the Jackson version, which didn't do it for me. I saw the 76 version, which I really liked, but I think that's because it was in contrast to the Jackson version. So yeah, it's a classic for a reason. If you are one of those skeptics out there like, oh, it's old, it's cheesy stop motion, and what am I going to get out of it? You're going to get out of it a lot, not only just like film history, but I dare say you're going to get more excitement than what you might see in the theaters today. And it's much shorter than what you're going to sit through today. Yeah,
it's definitely much shorter. Joe, what about you? Your final thought with this classic?
Grew up with it. My dad loved it. I love it. And in New York, every year on Thanksgiving, we'd start with March of the Wooden Soldiers on TV. And then during the day, WWOR would always have Godzilla movies and King Kong movies. So I actually have a weird relationship with the Godzilla and Mothra and stuff, because I don't know which ones I've seen, because I was like 10 years old and just sitting in front of the TV and they just played a bunch of Godzilla movies. So
nice.
So yeah, I grew up on these kinds of movies. I've been a monster kid since I was like a teenager. Mm-hmm. So anything I could catch on TV, I would always set my VCR to tape it, and that's how I saw the first King Kong, was setting up my VCR while I was in school, and I taped it, and then I came home and watched it. So it's like a warm blanket to me at this point. I'm glad to hear that people who are seeing it for the first time enjoy it, so I know I'm not just being nostalgic. Because I absolutely love this movie. I'm the kid who built the models, and my girlfriend 15 years ago, she and I spent the whole weekend building a Godzilla inside of a hot rod and painting the model and everything. That's how much we loved all these movies.
Nice.
So I'm that kind of nerd.
That's awesome.
And not that extent, but I am a nerd. I love my kaiju films, as many people know, the ridiculous ones and the really good ones. And this is a really good one, regardless of age. And especially if you can wrap your head around some of the stuff they did in here was not done before. And if you look at it, as I've always said with these old films, why you should go back go look at the origins of what you have today in effects and see where they came from, because this is where it came from. Your Godzilla, your monster, your side. The way this story not only plays out, but the effects that were used and the technique used, they're modernized, but they're still at their core the same techniques that were used back then, almost 100 years ago. Okay, and the reason is because they work. They work for your audience, and Kong really works. The Kong Skull Island, there's very few monster films I have seen in recent years that give you the feeling that the environment is as hostile as the feeling you get when you watch Kong from 1933. Once they get through the gate that the native tribe had built up and they're out in the wilds of the Skull Island, it's insane, all the dangers that they continuously present you with. It's not just one action set piece of Kong fighting a T-Rex. He fights a T-Rex. He grabs Fay Ray. He goes into a cave. There's a plesiosaurus that's going to eat her. So he grabs, he kills it. He takes her out to the ledge going, she'll be safe there. Pterodactyl shows up there. I mean, it's like boom, 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 boom. There's all this constant threat, and you get that feeling, and it's just wonderful. And even at the end, it still punctuates with a very interesting, almost humanizing angle with your Kong character, which is weird because you've seen him do all this nasty, mean, monster, brutal stuff, and then they give a little twinge of humanizing, which we'll talk about next week, my feelings of the ending of Peter Jackson's versus this one. But we won't go into today. But what we will do is we will go to our wheel. We have our wheel, folks, and we are going to see what next month's pre-code film would be. I think we've gone over here of why this film would have violated the Hays Codes a couple of years later. But let's see what next month has in store for
I have most of these on DVD or Blu-ray.
We're gonna have Putting on the Ritz.
One of the ones I don't have.
Which next month is Putting on the Ritz. I have come up with a list of films. As I mentioned, this isn't like to the extent of 52 Degrees planning, but I do have my month planned out for this one. So Putting on the Ritz month will be literally Putting on the Ritz month. We're going to be looking at Putting on the Ritz from 1930, Young Frankenstein from 1974, Blue Skies from 1946, and Communion from 1989. Put together what connects them all, and it's very easy, but you just give it some thought, folks. So that, my dear friends, is what we're going to be watching next month on the for our show. It'll be Putting on the Ritz month. So looking forward to that. And now, as always, I give my wonderful crew members their license to shill. So please, license to shill. Joe, the floor is yours, sir.
Well, one of the hosts of the Literary License podcast will be doing Batman the Animated Series this week. We just recorded Dr. Terror's House of Horrors and Torture Garden, which should be posting soon. I also appeared on their episode doing Doctor Who Dalek's Invasion Earth 2150 AD. So that should be coming out soon if it's not out already. Next week we'll be covering The Dark Crystal and wow, why am I blanking?
Labyrinth? No.
Yes, actually, perfect. It was Labyrinth.
Hey, we did a long time ago. We did dark kids movies from the 80s. So when you said Dark Crystal, I'm like, Labyrinth. That's just the natural pairing of the two.
The two Hensons, yeah. And the following week we'll continue covering anthology horror. We're doing a lot of the Amicus movies. We'll be doing The House That Bled to Death from 1971 and Asylum from 1972.
Nice. That's a hell of a lineup. Excellent. So check all that stuff out at Literary License Podcast. And now, Mr. Ian Simmons, Mr. Kicking Seat, please shill away.
Well, I'm Ian Simmons. I run Kicking the Seat, which you can find at kickseat.com. I'm also here on YouTube. You look up Kicking the Seat and you'll find me there doing live streams, interviews, movie reviews, roundtables, all that good fun stuff. So yeah, I'm also here on Monday nights talking about giant monster movies, and then next month putting on the Ritz and Young Frankenstein Community. I love your lineups, Mark. They're always so inventive, and talk about diversity. I couldn't have when you told me we're talking about putting on the Ritz. I'm like, okay, what else could I did not see that coming. So, yeah.
I have a feeling Young Frankenstein would be there if you guys hadn't already done it.
Yeah.
I've never seen Communion, so I don't know what the link is there.
It's pretty. It'll be pretty obvious if you ever watch it. There's a pretty famous scene in there involving. Well, I'll just leave it for a mystery. You'll probably be able to piece it together. Actually, it was one that was fun to put together, and also trying to find these films that make sure that they were available. That's always the other challenge of putting these lists together, folks, is trying to figure out if they're available. But what is available is specialmarkproductions.com for all your movie man needs. I have some reviews. It's going to be a little thin because we got the world's largest trivia contest coming up, but I do have a number of reviews that I've posted. I've got a few more this week that should drop before I'm tied up for a while. But we also got interviews that dropped recently that you should check out. They were a lot of fun, and some written word and all kinds of things there. But just go there and make sure you subscribe, like, and all the bells and whistles here. Thank you for the folks who watched the live stream. We appreciate every single one of you. And until next time, we'll just say good night, everyone.
Good night.
Everyone.